Welcome to the Unveiled Epochekos channel. Today, we're diving deep into an unexplored historical mystery, one that whispers from the sands of time, where the clash of steel and faith echoed across the Holy Land in ways few have ever truly uncovered. A tale of and shadows that saved Jerusalem from the brink of oblivion, drawing us into the hidden corridors of history where forgotten knights held secrets that could bend the will of empires. And as you settle in, let the gentle rhythm of this story carry you away, like a soft desert breeze under a starlit sky, inviting you to drift into the peaceful embrace of sleep, while the ancient world unfolds around you in vivid, soothing hues. In the year 1177, amid the sun-baked hills of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, where the air shimmered with heat and the distant call of muezzins mingled with the tolling of church bells, a young knight named Elias of rode through the olive groves that fringed the holy city, his armor glinting faintly in the fading light of dusk, carrying with him a burden that chafed his shoulders, a secret etched into an ancient parchment he had discovered in the ruins of a forgotten monastery high in the hills. A map not of lands, but of ley lines, mystical pathways said to channel the very essence of divine power, hidden from the world since the days of Solomon, and as Elias urged his steed onward, the wind whispering promises of revelation, he couldn't shake the feeling that this relic held the key to battle yet to come, one that would pit a mere handful of warriors against an overwhelming tide, saving not just stone walls, but the soul of a sacred place. Elias had come to the Holy Land as so many did, a pilgrim turned crusader, fleeing the misty shores of England where his family's estate lay in ruins after a bitter feud. But here in this arid paradise of palms and prophecies, he found something more profound, a sense of purpose intertwined with enigma. For in that monastery, cloaked in dust and spiderwebs, he had unearthed tales of a brotherhood long vanished, guardians of that could summon storms or heal the afflicted. The parchment spoke of a convergence point near the village of, where the earth's hidden energies aligned with the stars, a spot where miracles might manifest if invoked by one pure of heart. Yet Elias wondered if his own heart, scarred by loss and doubt, could withstand the trial ahead, as swirled through the crusader camps of Saladin's vast army marching from Egypt, 20,000 strong, their banners fluttering like dark wings against the horizon, intent on reclaiming Jerusalem for the faith of Islam. Their sultan a brilliant strategist, whose name alone sent shivers through the Frankish lords. King Baldwin IV, the leper king, his youthful face hidden behind a silver mask to conceal the ravages of his disease, sat in his tent within the city walls, surrounded by maps and advisers, his voice steady despite the pain that gnawed at his flesh. For he too harbored secrets, whispers from his tutors of ancient lore passed down through the royal line, knowledge of relics that could turn the tide of war. And when Elias was summoned before him, the knight knelt, presenting the parchment with trembling hands, the king's eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanning the faded script as if unlocking a door long sealed. And in that moment, a bond formed between them, monarch and knight, both bearers of hidden truths, deciding to rally what forces they could. A mere 1,200 knights from the orders of the temple and hospital, men tempered by faith and fire, to meet Saladin's horde not in open field, but at the convergence point, where mystery might meld with might. As the crusaders assembled under the cover of night, their horses' hooves muffled by cloth, Elias rode alongside Sir, a grizzled veteran with a scar across his cheek from years before, who shared tales around the campfire of lost crusades and spectral guardians, his voice low and rhythmic like the lapping of waves on a distant shore, calming the younger knights' nerves as they ventured into the unknown. And among them was Lady Isolde, disguised as a squire, her true identity a secret even to most. A noblewoman from who had fled an arranged marriage to seek adventure and perhaps redemption, her keen eyes spotting details others missed, like the faint glow on the horizon that hinted at Saladin's scouts. And as the group pressed on, the landscape unfolded in serene beauty, rolling dunes giving way to wadis lined with date palms, the air scented with wild thyme and the faint tang of salt from the Dead Sea, a world alive with the subtle hum of insects and the occasional cry of a jackal, drawing the listeners deeper into this tranquil tapestry of history. But shadows lurked beneath the calm, for within Saladin's camp, amid the vast array of tents stretching like a sea of canvas under the moon, the Sultan consulted his own seers, men versed in the arcane arts of the East, who spoke of omens in the stars and a forbidden stolen from Baghdad's libraries, a crystal said to reveal enemies' weaknesses, and Saladin, wise and merciful yet fierce in battle, sensed a disturbance in the balance, dispatching his trusted emir to probe the Crusader lines. Unaware that carried his own hidden agenda, a grudge against the Sultan born from a slight in court, plotting perhaps to turn the battle's chaos to his advantage, weaving intrigue into the fabric of war. Back with the knights, as dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and golds, Elias felt the parchment warm in his pouch, as if alive, guiding them to a humble crossroads where shepherds grazed their flocks unaware of the storm brewing. And there, Baldwin arrayed his forces, the 1,200 knights forming a wedge of steel and resolve, their lances lowered like thorns ready to pierce, while the Muslim army crested the hill, 20,000 warriors in mail and turbans, their scimitars gleaming. Drums beating a hypnotic rhythm that echoed through the valleys, a sound that could lull one into a trance, if not for the underlying tension. The battle began not with a roar but with a whisper, as Isolde, from her vantage, spotted a hidden path flanking the enemy, a discovery that shifted the odds, and Elias, invoking the parchment's words in silent prayer, felt a surge of energy, as if the ground itself trembled with ancient power, revealing a forgotten spring that quenched the knights' thirst and bolstered their spirits, a small miracle amid the mounting dread. Saladin's forces charged, a wave of cavalry thundering down, but the knights held, their formation unbreakable, lances impaling the front ranks in a clash that sent echoes rippling like gentle waves, and as blood mingled with dust, rising in crimson mists, Elias clashed with, their swords singing a duet of fate, the emir's eyes widening in recognition of the knight's amulet, a twin to one lost in his family's lore, hinting at a shared ancestry buried in time's sands. A twist that stayed his hand for a moment too long, allowing Elias to press the advantage. Meanwhile, Baldwin, despite his frailty, led a countercharge, his mask flashing in the sun like a beacon, inspiring his men to feats beyond mortal ken, as if the Lee lines amplified their courage, turning 1,200 into a force of legends, crushing wave after wave of the 20,000, the air filled with the scent of sweat and sandalwood, the sounds softening in memory to a lullaby of heroism. But betrayal loomed, for wounded but alive, whispered to his aides of Saladin's vulnerability, plotting a feint that could encircle the knights. Yet Isolde, overhearing in the melee, revealed her identity to, who a squad to intercept, in the process, a hidden cache of ancient scrolls in saddlebag, texts that spoke of a pact between Christian and Muslim sages to protect the holy sites from desecration, a forgotten truth that could have prevented the war, adding layers of mystery to the fray. As the sun climbed higher, the battle reached its zenith, Saladin's lines faltering under the relentless assault, the knight's charge breaking through like a river through stone, with Elias at the fore, the parchment now glowing faintly, summoning what seemed a divine wind that blinded the enemy with dust, a climatic revelation that this was no ordinary victory, but one ordained by hidden forces, saving Jerusalem from siege, and its walls stood firm for years to come. In the aftermath, as the field quieted, the survivors tended wounds under a sky turning to twilight's embrace. Baldwin conferred with Elias, acknowledging the parchment's role, deciding to bury its secrets once more to prevent misuse, while Isolde shared a quiet moment, their bond forged in fire, and captured, revealed his lineage tied to Elias through ancient bloodlines, a twist that healed old rifts, allowing a truce that echoed through history's unseen paths. The knights returned to Jerusalem as heroes, their tale whispered in taverns and cloisters, but the true mystery, the Lee lines, the shared destinies, remained veiled, a soothing enigma for future dreamers to ponder as they drifted into slumber, the Holy Land's eternal peace woven into the narrative's gentle close. As the echoes of the battle faded into the tranquil hush of evening, with the stars beginning to prick the velvet sky like distant lanterns, guiding weary souls home, Elias found himself wandering the outskirts of the field, his boots crunching softly over the trampled earth still warm from the day's fury, reflecting on the hidden threads that had woven this improbable victory, threads that stretched back not just to the Crusades, but to the enigmatic whispers of antiquity, where kings and prophets had walked these same lands, guarding secrets buried beneath layers of sand and scripture. And as he knelt to retrieve a fallen banner, its fabric torn yet defiant, he uncovered a small, ornate amulet half buried in the dirt, its surface engraved with symbols that matched those on his parchment, sparking a new mystery that pulled him deeper into the night's serene embrace, inviting dreams of untold adventures yet to unfold. The amulet, cool to the touch despite the lingering heat, seemed to pulse with a subtle energy, as if alive with the memories of those who had worn it before, perhaps a Templar initiate from the early days of the Order, or even a Saracen mystic who had crossed paths with Christian pilgrims in peaceful times. And Elias slipped it into his pouch, alongside the parchment, feeling a calm certainty that this was no mere trinket, but a key to further revelations, one that might lead him to the fabled underground chambers beneath Jerusalem's Temple Mount, chambers in forbidden texts to house the Ark of the Covenant or relics of even older provenance, lost from the time of the pharaohs, that had been spirited away during sieges long forgotten, blending Egyptian enigmas with biblical lore in a tapestry that soothed the mind like a lullaby sung by the ages. Meanwhile, in the royal pavilion where King Baldwin rested, his body aching but his spirit alight with the glow of triumph, he summoned his closest advisers, including the Grand Master of the Templars, a man of stern visage and unyielding faith, whose own secrets included visions granted during a near-death experience in a previous skirmish, visions of angelic hosts descending upon the battlefield, and together they pored over captured documents from Saladin's camp, discovering coded missives that hinted at a network of spies spanning from Damascus to Cairo, individuals who traded in shadows and whispers, their loyalties as fluid as the desert winds, adding a layer of intrigue that promised future quests under the moon's gentle watch. Lady Isolde, her disguise shed in the privacy of the camp, tended to the wounded with herbs gathered from the wadis, her hands steady and her voice a soft murmur that eased pain and invited slumber, with stories of her homeland, where lavender fields stretched endlessly under azure skies, and ancient Roman ruins hid tales of lost legions, her own journey to the Holy Land driven by a dream in which a veiled figure beckoned her eastward. A figure she now suspected was tied to the lee lines Elias had invoked, creating a personal mystery that intertwined their fates like vines on a trellis, swaying in a peaceful breeze. Bound but treated with the due a noble foe, sat in quiet contemplation within a guarded tent, his mind drifting to his youth in Baghdad, where scholars in the House of Wisdom had debated the stars and alchemy, and he recalled a forbidden book that spoke of alliances between faiths, pacts sealed in blood and starlight to protect sacred knowledge from zealots on both sides, a forgotten truth that now, in defeat, offered a path to redemption. Perhaps even collaboration with these Frankish knights to uncover a greater threat lurking in the shadows, a cult of assassins said to manipulate wars from afar, their daggers poisoned with venoms unknown to common healers, weaving a subplot of suspense that hung like a mist over the calming landscape. As night deepened, the campfires flickered like earthbound stars, casting warm glows on faces etched with exhaustion yet serene in victory, and Elias joined a circle of knights bread and wine, listening to tales spun by Brother, a hospitaller with a gift for storytelling, who recounted legends of the Grail, not the cup of Christ, but a vessel of wisdom hidden in these hills, guarded by spectral knights who appeared only to the worthy, his words flowing like a river's gentle current, lulling the group into reflective silence, while in the distance, the howls of hyenas blended with the rustle of palm fronds, a natural symphony that invited the soul to rest. But the amulet's discovery gnawed at Elias, and under the cover of darkness, he slipped away to a nearby ruin, an old Byzantine chapel half swallowed by time, its walls adorned with faded mosaics depicting scenes from the Old Testament. And there, by the light of a single torch, he compared the symbols to his parchment, a cipher that revealed coordinates to a hidden oasis, a place where water bubbled from rocks inscribed with runes, said to grant visions of the future to those who drank under a full moon, a revelation that promised personal growth amid the broader historical canvas, drawing him onward in a quest that felt as inevitable as the tide's pull. Saladin, retreating with the remnants of his army across the Sinai's vast, whispering dunes, pondered the day's events in his opulent tent, surrounded by loyal whose armor gleamed softly in lamplight, his mind turning to ancient Persian texts that spoke of fate's wheel and the interplay of destinies, suspecting that the Crusaders' victory was no mere luck, but aided by esoteric forces he had long studied, prompting him to dispatch a messenger to his libraries in Aleppo for scrolls on geomancy. The art of divining Earth's secrets, adding depth to his character as a scholar-warrior whose pursuit of knowledge mirrored the knight's own, in a narrative symmetry that soothed like balanced scales. Back in Jerusalem, as word of the battle spread through the narrow streets lined with merchants' stalls and incense-filled air, the people gathered in churches and mosques, whispering prayers of thanks, unaware of the hidden undercurrents, like the secret society of guardians Elias was unwittingly joining, a brotherhood that transcended faiths, dedicated to preserving the Lee lines from exploitation, their meetings held in catacombs where echoes carried ancient chants, building tension toward a future confrontation with those who sought to weaponize the mysteries. Isolde, riding back with the victors, confided in Elias about her own, a ring inherited from her grandmother, engraved with similar symbols, suggesting a familial link to the Guardians, a plot twist that deepened their bond and invited explorations of lineage, tracing back to the Merovingian kings or even further to Byzantine empresses who had smuggled relics during iconoclastic purges, her voice a melodic whisper against the rhythmic clip-clop of hooves on stone paths. Ever the pragmatist, uncovered a traitor among the Crusader ranks, a squire who had been feeding information to, leading to an interrogation under the stars where confessions flowed like wine, revealing a web of corruption tied to Venetian merchants profiting from the war, a subplot of greed that contrasted the pure quest for truth, resolved with mercy rather than vengeance, allowing the story to breathe in moments of forgiveness. As weeks turned to months, with the Holy Land settling into a fragile peace, Elias led a small expedition to the hidden oasis, guided by the amulet's glow, traversing wadis where wild goats leaped gracefully and eagles soared on thermal winds. The journey a meditative trek that allowed reflections on faith and doubt, culminating in a vision at the spring where he saw glimpses of future battles and alliances, including a reconciliation with Saladin himself, foreshadowing historical events, yet infusing them with fictional wonder. Released in a prisoner exchange, returned to Saladin with tales of the knights, planting seeds of respect that would influence the Sultan's strategies. While in Jerusalem, Baldwin commissioned the burial of the parchment in a sealed vault, but not before copying fragments that hinted at more convergence points across the Levant, setting the stage for sequels in the mind's eye. Isolde and Elias, their paths now entwined, shared quiet evenings in the city's gardens, where jasmine bloomed under moonlight, discussing philosophies from Aristotle to Avicenna, their conversations a bridge between cultures, soothing the narrative's edges with intellectual harmony. Yet mystery persisted, as reports trickled in of shadowy figures sighted near ancient sites, perhaps the assassins or rival guardians, building rising tension toward a climax where Elias confronted a dark adept in a subterranean chamber, swords clashing amid glowing crystals, the adept revealing himself as a distant kin twisted by ambition, resolved in a duel that echoed the battle's themes of light over shadow. In the end, with secrets safeguarded and bonds strengthened, the characters found solace in the Holy Land's timeless beauty, the sunsets painting the horizon in hues of gold and crimson, a satisfying close that left room for dreams. As the veils of twilight draped over the ancient city of Jerusalem, casting long shadows that danced like forgotten spirits across the golden stones of its walls, Elias stood upon the ramparts, the amulet now a constant companion around his neck, its subtle warmth a reminder of the unseen forces that had shaped the battle's outcome, forces that whispered of greater enigmas yet to be unraveled, like the labyrinthine tunnels said to snake beneath the city. Connecting holy sites in a web of sacred geometry, tunnels where echoes of Solomon's wisdom still lingered in the cool, musty air, inviting explorers to lose themselves in contemplation and quiet wonder. And as the call to prayer mingled with vesper bells in a harmonious lullaby, Elias pondered the next chapter of his journey, drawn inexorably toward the whispers of destiny that promised revelations as soothing as a mother's gentle hush. In the weeks that followed the victory the kingdom of Jerusalem breathed easier, its markets bustling with traders from afar, spices and silks exchanging hands under canopies that fluttered like sails on a calm sea. Yet beneath this surface, threads of mystery began to pull taut once more, for reports filtered in from distant outposts of strange occurrences, wells that suddenly ran with healing waters, visions seen by centuries of armored figures vanishing into mist, and King Baldwin, ever vigilant despite his affliction, tasked Elias with investigating these phenomena, suspecting they tied back to the Lee lines, those invisible arteries of power that pulsed through the earth like a hidden heartbeat, getting him to assemble a small fellowship including Isolde, and even a redeemed, who had been granted parole under oath of alliance, his knowledge of Eastern law proving invaluable in deciphering the signs, forging an unlikely band bound by shared secrets and the serene pursuit of truth. Their first venture led them southward, toward the sun-drenched shores of the Red Sea, where coral reefs shimmered beneath turquoise waves like submerged jewels, and ancient carvings etched into cliffs told tales of caravans long vanished. But as they camped amid the dunes, the wind carrying scents of myrrh and frankincense shared around the flickering fire stories from his homeland, legends of Jinn who guarded forgotten oases and could grant wishes to the pure-hearted. His voice a rhythmic cadence that evoked the undulating sands, lulling the group into reflective repose while hinting at a greater peril, a rival faction seeking to harness the Lee lines for domination, perhaps descendants of the old assassin's order, shadowy figures who moved like ghosts through the night. Isolde, her intuition sharp as a falchion's edge, noticed peculiarities in the stars that night, alignments matching the parchment's diagrams, leading them to a concealed cave entrance hidden behind a cascade of bougainvillea, its petals soft and fragrant, and within, torches lit to reveal walls adorned with frescoes depicting a council of sages from diverse faiths, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, united in stewardship of the ancient energies. A discovery that unveiled a hidden history of cooperation amid centuries of conflict, adding layers of intrigue that wrapped the narrative in a comforting blanket of possibility, suggesting that peace was not a dream but a buried reality waiting to be exhumed. Pragmatic as ever, unearthed a chest within the cave, its lock yielding to the amulet's touch as if by magic, revealing scrolls yellowed with age that spoke of a master convergence point far to the north, near the ruins of Antioch, where the ultimate lay, a crystal orb capable of harmonizing the Lee lines, preventing cataclysms or wars fueled by imbalance. And with this knowledge, the group set forth, traversing landscapes of olive-terraced hills and cedar groves where birdsong provided a melodic backdrop. Their journey a meditative pilgrimage that allowed bonds to deepen, conversations flowing like streams over smooth stones, personal mysteries such as Isolde's recurring dreams of a lost twin sister, or ancestral curse that had driven his earlier betrayal, each revelation healing wounds and inviting the soul to drift towards serenity. Yet shadows pursued them, for the rival guardians, led by an enigmatic figure known only as the Veiled One, ambushed their caravan in a narrow pass, arrows whistling like sighs through the air, forcing a skirmish where steel met steel in clashes that echoed softly against the cliffs. And in the fray, Elias invoked the amulet, summoning a veil of fog that concealed their escape, a minor miracle that reinforced the story's theme of hidden powers aiding the just, while one assailant who, under gentle questioning by the campfire's glow, confessed to a plot spanning empires, aiming to disrupt the balance and ignite a new holy war, twisting the Lee lines into weapons of chaos. Pressing onward, the fellowship reached Antioch's crumbling walls, overgrown with ivy that whispered secrets to the breeze, and beneath the remnants of a Byzantine basilica, they delved into catacombs lit by fungi casting an ethereal blue hue, the air cool and still like a forgotten breath, where puzzles of ancient design tested their wits, riddles inscribed in Aramaic collaborative wisdom from all faiths to solve. Fostering unity and providing moments of quiet triumph, that soothed the narrative's tension like a balm on weary limbs. At the heart of the labyrinth lay the orb, pulsating with inner light upon a pedestal carved from Jerusalem stone. But as Elias reached for it, the veiled one appeared, unmasking as a fallen Templar brother twisted by greed, his monologue revealing a backstory of betrayal during the First Crusade, adding a poignant twist that humanized the villain, leading to a climactic duel not of swords but of wills, where compassion prevailed over vengeance, the orb's energy dispelling the darkness within him, resolving the conflict in a wave of harmonious light that rippled through the lee lines, lasting peace across the land. With the secured and returned to Jerusalem's vaults, the characters parted as allies, their adventures etching indelible marks on their souls. Elias returning to his knightly duties with a renewed sense of purpose, Isolde founding a haven for scholars of all creeds, young squires with tales of, and bridging divides in Saladin's court, the Holy Land blooming anew under skies of endless blue, a conclusion wrapped in the gentle folds of history's embrace, leaving listeners adrift in dreams of unity and wonder. As the first hints of dawn painted the eastern sky in delicate strokes of rose and amber, casting a soft glow over the timeless spires of Jerusalem where history slept in every stone and shadow, Elias awoke from dreams laced with visions of the orb's light, its harmonious pulse still echoing in his veins like a distant melody, compelling him to seek out new horizons where forgotten truths awaited discovery. Truths that intertwined the fates of knights and sultans in ways that transcended the visible world, drawing him toward the rugged mountains of Lebanon, where ancient cedars stood as silent sentinels, their branches whispering secrets of Phoenician mariners who had once charted stars and seas. And in this serene awakening, the story unfolded anew, inviting the listener to surrender to the gentle current of narrative, drifting deeper into realms of mystery and repose. With the orb safely ensconced in the kingdom's hidden vaults, guarded by oaths sworn under the watchful eyes of the Templar brethren, Elias gathered his companions once more, sensing an unfinished symphony in the lee line's song, for had spoken in hushed tones of a sister in the north, a mirror to the orb said to reflect not light, but time itself, allowing glimpses into past echoes that could unravel present knots. And so they set forth on camel and steed, traversing the coastal plains where the Mediterranean lapped lazily at sandy shores, the air salted and invigorating, dotted with fishing villages where nets dried in the sun like spiderwebs of fate. And along the way, Isolde shared folklore from her homeland, tales of troubadours who sang of hidden grails and eternal loves, her words weaving a tapestry of calm that eased the rigors of travel, while scouted ahead, his keen eyes spotting caravans and ruins that hinted at older paths trodden by Alexander's legions or Roman centurions. Now a steadfast ally, navigated the group through Bedouin territories with diplomatic grace, exchanging stories around nomadic fires where tea steeped in copper pots released aromas of cardamom and mint, fostering bonds that blurred the lines of former enmity. And in these quiet evenings, under canopies of stars that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the earth, they pondered the greater enigma, a cosmic balance threatened by those who sought to shatter it. Perhaps agents of a distant caliphate or rogue alchemists from Byzantium, adding subtle layers of suspense that simmered like embers in a dying hearth, warming without alarming. As they ascended into the misty heights of the Lebanon range, where fog clung to pine-scented slopes like veils of forgotten brides, they stumbled upon an ancient hermitage carved into the rock, its entrance guarded by weathered statues of saints and sages, and within, an elderly monk, his beard white as fresh fallen snow, welcomed them with bread baked from wild grains and water from a sacred spring. Prophecies inscribed on palm leaves that foretold of a knight bearing an amulet who would mend the rifts of time, a revelation that mirrored Elias' own path, infusing his character with a sense of predestined calm, as if the universe itself conspired in gentle nudges toward enlightenment. The monk guided them to a concealed trail leading to a cavernous temple, once a sanctuary for Druze mystics who communed with the stars, its walls alive with constellations in glowing minerals that shifted with the viewer's gaze, and here, solving riddles etched in multiple tongues, Latin, Arabic, Hebrew, They unlocked a chamber housing the temporal mirror, a polished obsidian surface that, when activated by the amulet's touch, rippled like a pond disturbed by a soft rain, revealing visions of the battle from alternate angles, showing unseen acts of heroism by foot soldiers and mercy by foes, a twist that deepened the historical authenticity with fictional introspection, allowing characters to confront their doubts in a soothing cascade of what-ifs. But peril shadowed their triumph, for the Veiled One's acolytes, undeterred by their leader's redemption, launched a nocturnal assault on the hermitage, their silhouettes merging with the mist like phantoms born of night, forcing a were-wits triumphed over weapons. Isolde using herbal smokes to disorient, barricading with fallen cedars, negotiating a parley that exposed the acolyte's true master, a Venetian doge profiting from perpetual war, weaving economic intrigue into the mystical narrative, resolved in a climax of revelation rather than bloodshed, the mirror's light exposing illusions and fostering defections. With the mirror secured and its insights integrated into their lore, the Fellowship descended the mountains, the landscape unfolding in verdant valleys where rivers murmured lullabies over polished pebbles, and back in Jerusalem, they presented their findings to Baldwin, whose wisdom grew with each, envisioning a council of guardians spanning faiths to preserve the balance, a satisfying evolution that promised enduring harmony. Elias and Isolde, their hearts aligned like stars in conjunction, wandered the city's gardens at twilight, jasmine blooms releasing their perfume in waves of, contemplating futures where mysteries unfolded not in conflict but in quiet discovery, while and forged pacts that echoed through diplomatic channels, the battle's legacy as a bridge rather than a barrier. Yet whispers persisted of further scattered across distant lands, perhaps in the sands of Arabia or the isles of the Aegean, hinting at endless adventures. But for now, in the Holy Land's embrace, peace reigned under skies of infinite possibility, a conclusion that cradled the soul in dreams of unity and eternal wonder. July 15th, 1099. The morning solar blazed mercilessly over Jerusalem's blood-stained partitions, as Duke have received news that have to have meant the give-up of the entirety. 3 scouts stumbled into his command tent, their horses with foam, bearing reports of an Egyptian military so tremendous it comprehension. Iban, the maximum feared preferred in Islam, changed into marching north with 20,000 sparkling troops to reclaim the holy town. Towards this oceanic pressure should muster perhaps 200 powerful combating guys. The mathematics have been terrifying. 17 Egyptian warriors for each crusader knight. Photo this nightmare. Jerusalem had fallen simply 2 weeks earlier after a siege that ate up almost the whole thing. The crusader army that had marched from Europe with 60,000 souls now barely filled a village rectangular. Sickness, war, and the brutal warmth had reduced the awesome expedition to this pitiful remnant. Every surviving knight represented years of education and fortune identical to an entire way, however flesh and steel intended not anything towards such overwhelming numbers. Himself bore the scars of Jerusalem's conquest. At 39, the Duke of Decrease had established himself the day trip's finest battlefield commander. But even his tactical genius seemed inadequate against host. The Egyptian vizier commanded 5,000 heavy cavalry, slave soldiers educated from early life in installed battle. At the back of them marched 15,000 infantry, together with Sudanese spearmen whose bronze guns could punch through mail like parchment. The Egyptian bags trained by myself required 3,000 camels. Here's what the chronicles do not tell you approximately that sweltering morning in's tent. The selection wasn't, honestly, between combating and dying. Staying in Jerusalem supposed enduring siege by means of forces that had the metropolis from Seljuk Turks simply 12 months in advance. Knew every weak spot in the historic walls. Egyptian siege engineers should starve out the defenders within weeks, turning the Crusader triumph into records. Irony. However, marching out supposed sure annihilation in open war. Traditional crusader processes depended on heavy cavalry expenses that shattered enemy formations through sheer momentum. In opposition to disciplined ranks, such assaults could accomplish nothing however wonderful suicide. The Egyptian commander had broken large armies, the use of proven methods. Archers would bathe, coming near cavalry with arrows. Then heavy lancers would end survivors. Easy, effective, inevitable. Of Toulouse, the day Trip's eldest commander at 59, desperate. Strip Jerusalem's populace. Pay attention, every guy in the back of the strongest walls. Pray for remedy from Antioch. Of Antioch. Slightly 25, however, already legendary for battlefield audacity. Argued for instant attack earlier than Egyptian arrangements completed. Each solutions brought about destruction. The Scouts' reviews paint its role with precision that chilled veteran hearts. The Egyptian navy had made camp near Ascalon, 12. Of Jerusalem, controlling the coastal road that related Egypt to Syria. From there, they may both besiege the holy metropolis or intercept any crusader try to retreat in the direction of Antioch. The entice changed into ideal. As afternoon shadows lengthened throughout Jerusalem's conquered towers, made his calculations. 200 guys towards 20,000. Exhausted knights towards clean troops. Desperate Christians against assured Muslims. Each army guide ever written declared the outcome inevitable. However, here's what the chronicles don't tell you about's decision. The selection wasn't among victory and defeat. It was between two sorts of destruction. And in that not possible second, a revolutionary tactic changed into born that would rewrite the guidelines of medieval war for all time. This conflict system that emerged from the Egyptian Delta represented the pinnacle of medieval army enterprise. Image this terrifying spectacle coming nearest partitions. The viziers, 20,000. Warriors marched in perfect columns, stretching 8 across the coastal plain. Their day-by-day intake of grain, dates, and water equaled a city of 50,000 civilians. The dirt cloud from their improve may be seen from Jerusalem's towers. A brown smudge in opposition to the azure Mediterranean sky that grew larger every hour. On the army's middle road, 5000, slave squaddies bought as children and trained exclusively for mounted struggle. Every carried a composite bow capable of piercing mail at 200 yards, plus lance, sword and mace. Their horses bred from Arabian and Ort to preserve galloping speeds that European controlled only in brief bursts. Those weren't conscripted peasants or feudal Levites. These have been professional killers who had crushed Fatimid enemies from Sudan to Syria. At the back of the cavalry came 15,000 infantry prepared in unique formations that had conquered 1/2 of North Africa. Spearmen, their bronze factors glowing like stars. Nubian archers, whose bows required 150 of draw strength. Syrian engineers, hauling siege device that might reduce Jerusalem's walls to rubble within weeks. The logistics alone, Islamic navy superiority, wherein crusader armies slightly controlled simple supply lines. Quartermasters coordinated provisions for forces larger than most cities. However, here's what slightly mention approximately those vital days in mid-July. While organized methodically for siege, the crusader management changed into disintegrating. Of Toulouse, the day Trips, nominal commander, had fallen gravely unwell from wounds obtained for the duration of Jerusalem's attack. Fever ravaged his body as he lay semi-conscious in a requisitioned palace, unable to provide strategic route while it became maximum desperately needed. Without his unifying authority, the ultimate nobles fell into familiar styles of distrust and competition. Of Antioch controlled perhaps 400 guys. However, his forces were scattered throughout newly conquered territories, establishing garrison control over a populace that outnumbered them 50 to 1. Robert of Normandy commanded every other 300 knights, yet spent greater time over Jerusalem's spoils than the super crusader navy that had terrified Islam from to Antioch no longer existed as a cohesive fighting force. Intelligence reviews trickling into headquarters painted an increasingly more desperate image. Egyptian scouts probed Jerusalem's perimeter each day, mapping protective positions, counting defenders out vulnerable. Factors in walls, hastily repaired after the current siege. Wasn't rushing towards hasty assault. He turned into accomplishing methodical preparation for general victory. The numbers grew worse with each passing hour. Struck the Crusader camp, decreasing powerful opponents by means of dozens daily. Summer season warmness within the hills reached temperatures that left Ecu knights prostrate through midday, their mail armor turning into furnaces that cooked flesh beneath metallic. Water sources outdoor Jerusalem required risky foraging. Expeditions, as Egyptian cavalry patrols, tightened their noose across the holy city. Then the entirety modified at the night of August 11th. A very last council of struggle gathered in the captured dome of the rock, now rapidly converted into a Christian chapel. Unfold maps throughout tables nevertheless stained with Muslim blood, reading routes, calculating distances, weighing impossible options. The assembled commanders represented Christianity's final hope in the East. Yet their blended forces barely matched. An unmarried Egyptian department. What befell next, every precept of medieval method. Instead of getting ready for siege or negotiating phrases of give up, announced the most audacious navy selection given that Hannibal crossed the Alps. They would march out at dawn and assault overwhelming host in open conflict. The assembled knights stared in shocked silence. Army suicide had in no way sounded so evenly reasoned. August the 12th, 417 a.m. Absolute darkness shrouded the hills as 120 Crusaders started their very last march in the direction of eternity. No trumpets introduced their departure. No banners flew inside the pre-sunrise stillness. Of had ordered whole silence as his tiny navy crept through Jerusalem's gates like ghosts in search of their personal grave. Each footstep at the historical stones echoed with finality. The formation that emerged each conference of Crusader conflict. In place of the traditional heavy cavalry leading edge accompanied by way of suffering infantry, had created something revolutionary. 3 coordinated divisions moved in ideal synchronization throughout the rocky terrain. He commanded the middle with 400 knights and men at hands. Of Toulouse, in spite of his fever, insisted on leading the left wing with 350 infantry. Of Antioch managed the proper with 450 mixed cavalry and foot. Here's in which legend meets tactical truth. Medieval armies usually marched in free columns that required hours to shape struggle lines. As pressure advanced, already organized for on-the-spot combat. Each department retaining precise durations that allowed instant deployment. The innovation represented years of hard-won revel, compressed into determined necessity. Those were not the enthusiastic pilgrims who had departed Europe 4 years in advance. Those were veterans who understood that survival supposed adapting or loss of life. The 12 approach march through darkness examined human staying power beyond normal limits. Knights and 80-pound mail struggled throughout damaged floor while retaining absolute silence. Infantry carried 14 spears that stuck on rocks and scrub brush with each step. The august heat, even at night time, left guys gasping for water they could not spare. But Field held with iron dedication born of knowing that a single noise, one stumbling horse, one clanking piece of gadget ought to alert Egyptian sentries and doom all of them. By using 5:30 a.m., the Jap horizon commenced glowing light gold as scouts suggested Egyptian positions ahead. Its large camp sprawled across the coastal aircraft like a brief metropolis. Cooking fires dotted the landscape, in which 20,000 guys prepared morning food in comfy confidence. The Egyptian commander had located his forces with mathematical precision. Heavy cavalry picketed near the ocean to save you escape. Infantry camps blocked inland routes. Command tents occupied the middle, covered through earrings of guards. However, had made one vital miscalculation. His overwhelming numerical superiority had bred complacency. Egyptian sentries watched for messengers and deliver convoys, now not suicide assaults by forces they outnumbered 17 to 1. The high-quality, fashionable's tactical doctrine assumed rational enemies who understood mathematical impossibility. He had in no way confronted determined Christians, convinced that God demanded miracles. Dawn broke with shocking suddenness across the Mediterranean sky, revealing the Crusader divisions, positioned simply 400 from the drowsing Egyptian camp. Raised his sword, morning mild, catching the metallic like divine. Hearth. The sign passed instantly via prearranged hand gestures. No horns, no, just surprising coordinated violence erupting from nowhere. The outer Egyptian pickets died earlier than they could scream warnings. Tanks' cavalry struck like lightning, spearing sentries who have been still rubbing sleep from their eyes. Infantry stormed via gaps within the camp perimeter, slicing down stressed guards who couldn't apprehend how Christians had materialized from empty air. Middle division punched instantly closer to his command role, carving via tents wherein Egyptian officials struggled into armor whilst nonetheless half of asleep. What befell in the one's first 20 mins, every Navy guide ever written. Marvel assaults succeeded through careful planning and superior intelligence. The Crusaders possessed neither advantage besides desperation delicate into best tactical execution. They'd done the impossible whole strategic wonder towards a force that need to have detected them miles away. End. 20 minutes, the inevitable had grown to be unthinkable. But wasn't finished. What befell subsequent would take a look at whether or not braveness could triumph over arithmetic when the Egyptians ultimately understood what had struck them. The Egyptian camp exploded into chaos as 20,000 slumbering warriors awakened to find death already among them. Photo the sensory overload. Crusader steel slicing through canvas partitions. Screams in Arabic echoing across tent rows. The crash of collapsing pavilions as panicked horses trampled man ropes. Perfectly organized Navy town transformed right into a slaughter pen in 17 minutes of coordinated violence that must in no way have been possible. 450 cavalry carved through the Egyptian horse strains like scythes via wheat. Warriors, the best heavy cavalry in Islam, died struggling into saddles, while Christian lances determined gaps between male earrings. The arithmetic had been brutal. Every installed crusader confronted capability fight with 40 enemies, but Marvel compressed the one's odds into character encounters where advanced armor and determined fury overcame numerical drawback. But then tactical genius emerged from the chaos. The Egyptian vizier hadn't conquered half of North Africa through panic. From his command role close to the sea, he watched catastrophe spread with calculating precision. His drum alerts echoed throughout the camp, calling scattered gadgets to predetermined rally factors. Within half hour, 5,000 cavalry had withdrawn past Crusader reach, forming disciplined ranks on the coastal aircraft, in which numbers could finally count number. The counterattack struck like divine retribution. Egyptian heavy cavalry thundered forward in waves that shook the earth beneath their hooves. The sound description: 20,000 iron hooves hitting packed sand created percussive force that men felt of their bones before hearing reached their ears. Dirt clouds rose 100 feet, turning morning daylight into apocalyptic twilight. Middle division, stuck scattered through the Egyptian camp, confronted annihilation. His 400 knights had unfold too skinny, fleeing enemies. Their formation dissolved within the intoxication of not possible success. Now lancers bore down on remoted groups of Christians who could not retreat fast sufficient to attain defensive positions. Here's in which desperation met tactical brilliance. Rather than ordering retreat that would end up bloodbath, commanded develop. The last Crusader divisions abandoned camp looting to shape protective squares that bristled with 14-feet spears. Infantry locked shields in overlapping walls while knights dismounted to fight on foot, their heavy armor providing protection that mobility could not match towards such overwhelming numbers. The collision, whilst it got here, redefined violence. Cavalry struck Crusader formations, a complete gallop. Lances shattering against overlocked shields, horses screaming as they impaled themselves on Christian spears. To the front, ranks of both armies disappeared in mutual destruction. Egyptian riders died, pressed in opposition to Frankish steel. Crusader infantry collapsed beneath the burden of fallen horses and guys. Casualties hooked up with mathematical precision. In 27 minutes of close fight, 800 Egyptian cavalry lay useless or death. The Crusaders had misplaced 150 men. Grievous losses for his or her tiny force. But the change fee remained catastrophically of their prefer. Overwhelming numbers had been bleeding away towards Christian discipline and superior shielding tactics. But the Egyptian commander wasn't taking flight. He became learning. The following assault mixed, set up archery with infantry help, forcing Crusader squares to agreement whilst arrows fell like metallic rain. Composite bows capable of piercing mail at 200 wide, determined gaps in formations burdened past breaking points. Young knights collapsed with Turkish shafts protruding from shoulders and thighs. The disaster came when of Toulouse, Maine from the front in spite of his fever, took an arrow through the throat. The vintage count staggered but remained upright, blood streaming down. His circuit as he endured shouting orders through vocal cords that barely functioned. His guys, seeing their commander dying on his, fought with fury that transcended human barriers. Seized the moment. His cavalry reformed after their preliminary rampage struck's flank at exactly the on-the-spot, when Egyptian attention targeted on wavering department. The younger Norman prince led from the front, his lance taking an Egyptian emir through the chest at full gallop. At the back of him, 200 mounted knights, carved via packed infantry who couldn't form ranks speedy sufficient to resist. The arithmetic had shifted. Through 8:30 m. confronted a tactical impossibility. His navy had misplaced 2,000 dead towards 400 Crusader casualties. More severely, Egyptian morale changed into cracking as warriors who had conquered from Cairo to Damascus discovered themselves systematically destroyed through forces they outnumbered 10-1. Then made a decision that confounded every rule of medieval struggle. In place of consolidating defensive fulfillment, he ordered widespread advance. The complete Crusader military could attack closing 18,000 troops in open battle. The silence that followed's final fee carried weight beyond human comprehension. By using 9:15 m, the coastal plain near Ascalon resembled hell's own market. 7,000 Egyptian lifeless carpeted the battlefield in formations that informed the story of systematic destruction. Cavalry, Islam's best horsemen, lay twisted amongst their mounts, in geometric styles wherein crusader squares had held company. Infantry sprawled in home windows where Norman lances had carved bloody furrows via packed ranks. His potent host had certainly disintegrated. The Egyptian vizier himself fled towards Ascalon's walls with possibly 3,000 survivors from a navy that had numbered 20,000 at sunrise. In the back of him lay no longer just army defeat, but the complete crumble of Fatimid strength projection into the Levant. The mathematical impossibility had grown to be documented. Truth witnessed, with the aid from each aspect, dismounted a few of the carnage, his sword arms striking useless from wounds that might in no way fully heal. The Duke of Decrease had personally killed 11 Egyptian warriors, including emirs, whose our bodies lay inside a tain of his banner. Yet victory's fee confirmed in every line of his face. The Crusader military that had completed the not possible numbered slightly 800 powerful warring parties from the 200 who had marched out at sunrise. The battlefield spoils. Notion. Baggage teach contained treasures amassed through a long time of Egyptian conquest. Gold dinars through the thousand. Silk from Damascus, really worth a king's ransom. Spices from Indian Ocean, alternate routes. Guns and armor crafted within the best workshops of Cairo. Man or woman crusader knights located themselves unexpectedly rich past European noble standards. Their participation inside the not possible victory incomes fabric rewards that might rework their households' fortunes for generations. But right here's what the chronicles slightly point out approximately those crucial hours after victory. Whilst commonplace squaddies celebrated and counted plunder, the surviving commanders grappled with strategic consequences that prolonged some distance past instantaneous triumph. Of Antioch, bleeding from 3 wounds, however nevertheless mounted, advocated immediately pursuit of remnants. Capture Ascalon itself, he argued, hold the destruction of Egyptian energy in Palestine. Of Toulouse, slightly aware from blood loss, but still commanding his division, warning with phrases that emerged as slightly audible whispers. The old remember understood what younger knights could not grasp. That they had finished tactical miracle via desperation and best timing, but such instances may want to in no way be replicated. Higher to consolidate profits than chance the whole thing on persisted aggression. The human fee have become apparent as battlefield surgeons' casualties with brutal precision. 300 crusader dead, consisting of some of Christianity's greatest knights. Another 200 wounded, so critically they would in no way fight once more. Himself would die from his throat wound within 6 months. The best strategic thoughts of the First Crusade ate up via contamination that medieval medicine couldn't treat. But the strategic transformation turned into complete. In 4 hours of impossible struggle, 200 exhausted Christians had eliminated the final serious chance to their kingdom. Its defeat meant no Egyptian army could venture crusader manage of Palestine for the subsequent too many years. The Fatimid Caliphate, after losing their best troops in mathematical impossibility, could retreat to protecting positions around the Nile Delta. Person acts of heroism emerged from survivor debts that might echo via centuries of military history. Brother William, a health facility knight, who held a breach by myself for 7 mins even as reinforcements arrived. Sergeant the Breton, whose crossbow killed 6 officers earlier than an Egyptian scimitar determined his neck. Nameless foot. Squaddies whose names seem in no chronicle, but whose determined courage made victory feasible. Image the mental effect on each armies. Egyptian survivors might return to Cairo, bearing stories that rejected notion. How should when 200 Franks wreck forces that outnumbered them 17 to 1? Islamic navy doctrine, based totally on mathematical calculation and tactical superiority, provided no explanation for such entire reversal of natural order. The Crusaders themselves struggled to realize their fulfillment. Many attributed victory to divine intervention, claiming they'd witnessed angels fighting beside Christian ranks. Others diagnosed tactical innovation, blended with ideal timing, had overcome not possible odds via human agency in preference to supernatural intervention. As afternoon shadows lengthened throughout the battlefield, made the decision that could define his nation's destiny. No pursuit of remnants, no siege of Ascalon, consolidation of gains in place of unstable growth. The not possible victory had taught him that miracles could not be repeated on call for. The strategic earthquake that began at dawn close to Ascalon's walls rippled across the medieval global for many years. Inside 18 months in their not possible victory, the Crusaders had converted from determined survivors into the dominant military strength within the Japanese Mediterranean. The tactical innovations born from mathematical desperation became trendy doctrine for Christian armies from Antioch to Tripoli. Sunrise assaults, coordinated department moves, infantry-cavalry integration that had emerged from necessity now unfold in the course of the Crusader states as established technique. But the deeper results extended some distance beyond tactical manuals. Catastrophic defeat marked the quit of Fatimid navy credibility. The Egyptian Caliphate, which had dominated from Spain to Sudan for 2 centuries, never again fielded armies able to challenging Crusader enlargement. Their naval supremacy within the Japanese Mediterranean remained, however, without land. Forces to make the most it, Egyptian electricity withered into nearby, protecting posturing across the Nile Delta. Islamic navy doctrine itself underwent essential revision due to Ascalon's training. Muslim commanders who had depended on numerical superiority and conventional methods observed that desperate enemies working under impossible pressure could acquire effects that rejected mathematical calculation. Destiny Islamic techniques emphasized heading off pitch battles towards consolidated Crusader forces, preferring siege battle and attrition campaigns that negated Christian tactical benefits. The Crusader state's survival depended totally on the precedent installed for the duration of those 4 hours of impossible combat. When Saladin ultimately emerged to project Christian dominance almost a century later, he studied Ascalon's instructions with scholarly precision. The superb Kurdish commander understood that Frankish armies fighting for survival represented completely specific warring parties than Frankish armies. Preventing for conquest. His method at deliberately averted giving Crusader forces the desperation that had made them invincible in opposition to. Character careers have been transformed via participation inside the mathematical miracle. Tancred of Antioch leveraged his popularity from Ascalon to set up the most aggressive Crusader principality, increasing Christian control deep into northern Syria through campaigns that's dawn attack method. His tactical guide, written in the months following victory, became required reading for each knight serving within the Latin East. The mental impact on Christian morale at some point of Europe cannot be overstated. Ascalon's victory arrived in Western chronicles as proof that divine supported the Crusader purpose, even in opposition to impossible odds. Recruitment for subsequent expeditions increased dramatically as nobles sought to participate in campaigns that had done documented miracles. The not possible had come to be repeatable via right preparation and absolute commitment. But the struggle's most profound lesson involved limitation as opposed to capability. Its choice to halt pursuit and consolidate profits tested knowledge that many next commanders overlooked to their destruction. Navy miracles, but remained injuries of timing and situation that could not be synthetic through willpower alone. The mathematical impossibility that stored Jerusalem in 1099 represented repeatable convergence of factors that future battles could lack. Current take a look at Ascalon, mostly, for instance, of blended hands coordination, performed through desperate innovation. The seamless integration of cavalry, surprise movement with infantry protecting capability, expected tactical tendencies that wouldn't emerge as widespread till centuries later. Body of workers schools from Sandhurst to West Point analyzed the battle's instructions approximately pressure multiplication via advanced coordination and timing. The 800 Crusader survivors who staggered back to Jerusalem that nighttime had fundamentally altered the strategic balance of the medieval world. Their success echoed via 2 centuries of subsequent warfare, setting up tactical standards that defined Crusader army doctrine until the kingdom's final crumble in 1291. Each subsequent Christian victory within the East traced its family tree lower back to those 4 hours, whilst impossibility became fact through subject and desperation. July 15th, 1099. The morning sun had blazed mercilessly over Jerusalem as Duke received news of drawing near annihilation. By sundown on August the 12th, that identical sun set over a transformed global wherein 200 exhausted knights had established that mathematical impossibility intended not anything towards human will, subtle into ideal tactical execution. They had the policies of medieval war in their own blood, coaching history that the best victories emerge no longer from power, but from regular guys refusing to simply accept defeat when the whole thing they valued hung within the stability. This mysterious journey ends here, but stay tuned for more untold stories in our next video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Thank you